Hi, sweet beans. Welcome back to Wild Geese. I'm your host, Anna. I'm filming on a new camera today. I got the Canon PowerShot V1. Before that, I had the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, and that one just felt a little bit too fragile for me to actually take around with me everywhere. Not that I'm going to be literally vlogging everywhere, but this has been really fun to play with because I actually feel comfortable just whipping it out. Okay. What a way to say that. I feel comfortable taking it out at any random moment, and I just feel like I'm documenting and gathering up little pieces of my life that then I get to, during the editing process, go back and reflect on. And I don't know, it's been a really fun experience for me, and it kind of reminds me of the inspiration for this episode. This episode is inspired by two things, one of which is a Tumblr post, and the other is an essay called The Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction by Ursula Le Guin. But the Tumblr post says this. It says, "I think the purest form of love is just wanting someone to notice life with you. Taste this, look at that, hear this song again and again until you can't imagine noticing life without them." Sometimes to me that is how I feel when I'm vlogging. I'm like, look at this. Look at what I just discovered. And while I was preparing for this episode, I actually thought that those two pieces of inspiration were going to be two separate episodes. But one of my favorite things of all time happened, and I found the connection between the two of them, so it became one big episode. Actually, I don't know how big it'll be. This is the beginning of me filming it. I really don't know. Feels big. Might be standard length. And I will dig into Ursula's essay a lot more later in the episode, but the basic premise is that the very first human tool that was invented actually was not a weapon or a spear or like a club as you might see a caveman depicted with. Instead, it was likely a container or a vessel. So Ursula was using this anthropological idea as a way to reevaluate the stories that we've been taught to value. Like, if the innovations of humanity began with us learning how to hold many things at once, that paints a very different picture than a story that tells us that humanity began with the violence of a spear. Ursula proposes a way of storytelling that doesn't center conflict and domination, and instead centers gathering, the creation of a space that can contain all that is sacred. That's what she says the novel is. I know that may not make total sense yet because I'm definitely getting ahead of myself, but hang with me. I want to talk about love as a container, a way of gathering and sharing the world. I have a listener question that I want to bounce off of a little bit. Like I said last time, the new email to send listener questions to is wildgeesepod@gmail.com. Please don't send anything to that email except things that you want me to respond to live on an episode. Not live. I guess I'm not really live, but you know what I mean. I want to talk about love as a container. Ursula speaks of the novel as a container, and I want to think about relationships in a similar way. And I want to ground the conversation in a little bit of history too. I've been reading Inventing the Renaissance by Ada Palmer. I'm not done with it yet. It's a hefty one, but she has already made some fascinating points about how the stories we tell about history have the power to change the future. So I've been sitting on this question of like, if we saw storytelling as a way of gathering instead of a way of dominating, how might that change our relationship to each other? Whether that's like on a mass scale or each other as individuals. So I do have a listener question that I'm going to be engaging with a little bit there. But as you collect and share stories, moments, and ideas online, the browser you use matters. And that brings me to today's sponsor, Opera. I chose Opera over the default web browsers for a faster, safer web browsing experience. I've been impressed by the way that Opera allows you to alter the entire theme of your browser, including animated backgrounds, UI colors, browser sounds, and more. I found this to be perfect for setting the tone while I write and getting my creative juices flowing. I also love Opera's tab islands where you can group tabs based on different projects or contexts, making it so much easier to stay organized. I can name and color code all of my tab islands so that my writing tabs don't get mixed up with my shopping tabs. And I can easily expand and collapse tabs when I'm done. The video pop-out feature also comes in handy for me all the time. I can easily detach and move the videos I'm watching beyond the browser window with no extra apps or windows needed. Using this feature allows me to take notes on what I'm watching without missing anything in the video or clogging up my tabs. And I use the Google services in the sidebar every day. This simple design feature has probably saved me more time than anything else. They allow me to put things like Gmail and Google Calendar on the side of my screen. And this not only helps me keep my additional tabs to a minimum, it also serves as a little visual cue for me to check my emails, something that I am famously not very good at tracking. You can click the link in the episode description to download Opera for free today. Okay, before we get into the meat of this episode, I feel like I need to I need to come clean about the fact that the only thing that has been running through my head for the last 72 hours is that soundbite from Renee Elise Colesbury where she's like, "My name is Angelica Schuyler. Where's your family from?" Oh, so beautiful. Anyway, time to get serious. So The Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction by Ursula Le Guin is this essay that's expanding on the carrier bag theory of human evolution put forward by Elizabeth Fisher in the book Woman's Creation, which posits that the first cultural device was likely a recipient. So like we were saying before, like a vessel, a bag, cupped hands, etc. The earliest preserved tools are in fact stone tools, but there were probably tools before that wouldn't have survived the archaeological record that were made for gathering and carrying things that would have been made out of like organic materials that would have broken up over time. So like woven fabrics or leaves or even the cupping of hands. Ursula even says at the beginning, the principal food of the species was vegetable. 65 to 80% of what human beings ate in those regions in Paleolithic, Neolithic, and prehistoric times was gathered. Only in the extreme Arctic was meat the staple food. But even in the populations where meat was the staple food, it would make sense that they would need to create a container to bring what they hunted back home. And Ursula says, quote, the average prehistoric person could make a nice living in about a 15-hour work week. 15 hours a week for sustenance leaves a lot of time for other things. So much time that maybe the restless ones who didn't have a baby around to enliven their life, or skill in making or cooking or singing, or very interesting thoughts to think, decided to slope off and hunt mammoths. Wait, pause. I think it's honestly so funny that she's like, yeah, maybe if you were super lame and boring, you would go off and hunt and kill things. Don't get mad at me if you're a hunter, I do not care. But she goes on to say, the skillful hunters would then come back staggering with a load of meat, a lot of ivory, and a story. It wasn't the meat that made the difference, it was the story. And she's basically like, yeah, it's hard to tell an interesting story about like gathering seeds and getting bug bites and making silly jokes with your friends. The story that someone brings back from hunting a mammoth is like automatically more interesting. And she says that story not only has action, it has a hero. Heroes are powerful. Before you know it, the men and women in the wild oat patch and their kids and the skills of the makers and the thoughts of the thoughtful and the songs of the singers are all part of it, have all been pressed into service in the tale of the hero. But it isn't their story. It's his. And then she says, we've heard it. We've all heard all about all the sticks and spears and swords, the things to bash and poke and hit with, the long, hard things. But we have not heard about the things to put things in, the container for the thing contained. That is a new story. That is news, and yet old. With or before the tool that forces energy outwards, we made the tool that brings energy home. Something about this is reminding me of the fact that otters have like a built-in pouch in their body, like loose skin, that they use to carry their favorite rock with them. But why does it matter? Like, okay, we might have had containers before we had swords. Why does this matter to me? And I think it's because we're often told that in order to tell a good story, you have to have conflict, that that's like a central component of a good story. But I think stories that center conflict and hero worship are very often just war propaganda and ways of like legitimizing empires. And this is where Inventing the Renaissance by Ada Palmer comes in, because the hero's journey has served a function in history that goes way past entertainment. And I could pull out so many different examples throughout history, but I will use Inventing the Renaissance because I'm reading it right now. Inventing the Renaissance, to give you a little bit of backstory, is a reevaluation of the Renaissance, which is like this very long period of time from the end of the Middle Ages to the beginning of modernity. This book asks questions of like, when did the Renaissance actually start? Why do we see the Renaissance as this time when people were like thriving more than usual and more innovations in art and technology were made at this like rapid pace? Is that actually based in reality? Spoiler alert, no, not really. And who does it benefit for us to think of the Renaissance the way that we do? She's getting very specific in looking for what she calls the X factor, like what exactly made the Renaissance feel like this different, more innovative period. And the reason she's so fascinated with this, and the reason why I am now too, trust me, I did not care about the Renaissance a few weeks ago, is because she says that the idea of a Renaissance can and has been used as propaganda campaigns. She says no matter how mythical golden ages are, they're incredibly useful to later regimes and peoples who want to make glorifying claims about themselves. If you present yourself, your movement, your business model, your political proposal, etc., as the return of a golden age, or the successor to a golden age, that can make you seem important, powerful, and legitimate. The secret we all know is that governments, countries, laws, nations, none of them are real like hills or rivers. They're a bunch of stuff humanity invented. They exist only as long as we keep agreeing they exist and act accordingly. One powerful tool of legitimacy is invoking a past golden age. Under my rule, we will all be great like X was great. This claim can be made by a monarch, a ruling council, a political party, an individual, a movement, even a business. Which, like, Do I even have to say the quiet part out loud? That sounds a lot like Make America Great Again, does it not? And I just think it's fascinating that hero worship goes beyond these like little stories that we're passing around the campfire or Marvel movies that we're watching in theaters. So much of our perception of the time period of the Renaissance just comes down to storytelling and creating this myth of the Golden Age in which these heroes swooped in and made things a little bit brighter for a while. As a little example, Ada talks about one guy named Leonardo Bruni, who was an Italian historian in the 1400s. He wrote The History of the Florentine People, which was the first book to divide history into 3 parts: ancient, middle, and modern, or what we call the Renaissance. And this idea of splitting history into 3 parts where like one part of it sparkled above the rest was very enticing to the people at the time because it held the power for legitimacy. But one person Leonardo Bruni wrote about was the Viper of Milan, Gian Galeazzo Visconti. Gian Galeazzo Visconti. Sorry. He ambushed? I need to lock in. He ambushed and supplanted his uncle to seize the throne of Milan. And then he went on to conquer a lot of Italy, and Florence suffered a major defeat in 1402. But Leonardo Bruni, our historian guy who made up the 3 parts of history, he came in and wrote a totally different account of what happened. Bruni literally came in and made a bunch of shit up about Florentine statesmen coming in and making this magnificent speech that like swayed the Venetian ambassadors to sign with Florence over Milan, ultimately leaving Visconti defeated. Not true. So when this history was written, the grandson of the Viper of Milan was like, are you kidding me? Like, you can't just make shit up like that. And Ada says, except they can, and they did. It turns out history isn't written by the winners. History is written by the people who write histories. So Ada's like, okay, what are you going to do about it, grandson of the Viper of Milan? And she says, there's only one thing to do. Hire one of those newfangled scholars to write a history of your city and your family framed your way, replacing Bruni's narrative with a glorious story where you constantly kicked Florentine's ass. That's what the Duke did. That's what everybody did. Milan, Venice, France, England, Hungary, and Naples. Everybody had to have a history. And all these new histories claimed there had been a bad Middle Age. And we were in the glorious classical revival-powered New Age, whose rulers would rival great princes of legend. All these new histories, and their soon-to-follow cousin genre, the heroic family epic in Aeneid style, adjusted details to make the current rulers look great and legitimate, generally at the expense of making the newly invented Middle Ages look bad. I'm sorry, I'm like laughing through telling all of this because is that not the funniest shit you've ever heard? Everyone's just like, oh, wait, we can talk out of our ass? If we hire someone that's good at writing, we can just make stuff up that makes us look good? Okay, I can make a hero of myself? Yes, let's do it. It's not even simple entertainment anymore. Like, that's self-preservation. And it makes sense. But I don't want every story that I'm told to be fashioned around and centered around domination and conflict, because it does seem that those stories are largely told to benefit empires, not to stay concerned with the truth. And going back to Ursula, she says, so the hero has decreed through his mouthpieces, the lawgivers first, that the proper shape of the narrative is that of the arrow or spear, starting here and going there and thok, hitting its mark, which drops dead. Second, that the central concern of narrative, including the novel, is conflict. And third, that the story isn't any good if he isn't in it. I differ with all of this. I would go so far as to say that the natural, proper fitting shape of the novel might be that of a sack, a bag. A book holds words. Words hold things. They bear meanings. A novel is a medicine bundle, holding things in a particular powerful relation to one another and to us. One relationship among elements in the novel may well be that of conflict, but the reduction of narrative to conflict is absurd. Conflict, competition, stress, struggle, etc. within the narrative conceived as carrier bag, belly, box, house, medicine bundle may be seen as necessary elements of a whole which itself cannot be characterized either as conflict or as harmony, since its purpose is neither resolution nor stasis, but continuing process. That is why I like novels. Instead of heroes, they have people in them. So like she says, this isn't about ignoring or omitting conflict from stories, but decentering it. Decentering the hero entirely in favor of the human being. The ones that don't always understand what's going on, that are messy and bored and flailing. like making room in the bag for other details, like things that are loved in silence, things that are capable of growing, whatever. I also think Ursula is making a case for nonlinear storytelling, like making space for the actual shape of growth, which is more of a spiral rather than a straight line. I remember in college I took a class called Feminism in Theater, and a lot of that class was dedicated to talking about nonlinear storytelling as a way to kind of break the illusion that storytelling often presents, that it is just like a beginning, middle, and end. And I think we're so used to that structure, like we're so comfortable with it, that when things break out of that, it can rub people the wrong way a little bit. But I think discomfort can be fruitful sometimes. Beyond the fact that stories that are so overly concerned with domination and the hero and that sort of thing are very often told in service to war propaganda and legitimizing empires, whatever, there's also a personal effect that it can have on you to hear these stories if you're not the one going out and hunting. Obviously, that's a metaphor, but you know what I mean. Ursula talks about how the overemphasis on these stories actually made her feel severed from her own humanity. She says, so long as culture was explained as originating from and elaborating upon the use of long, hard objects for sticking, bashing, and killing, I never thought that I had or wanted any particular share in it. Wanting to be human too, I sought for evidence that I was. But if that's what it took, to make a weapon and kill with it, then evidently I was either extremely defective as a human being or not a human at all. That's right, they said. What you are is a woman. If it is a human thing to do, to put something you want because it's useful, edible, or beautiful into a bag or a basket or a bit of rolled bark or leaf or a net woven of your own hair or what have you, and then take it home with you, home being another larger kind of pouch or bag, a container for people, and then later on you take it out and eat it or share it or store it up for winter in a solider container or put it in the medicine bundle or the shrine or the museum, the holy place, the area that contains what is sacred, and then next day you probably do much the same again. If to do that is human, if that's what it takes, then I am a human being after all, fully, freely, gladly, for the first time. I just love the way she puts this, how it's like a bag within a bag. The home itself is a container. We'll come back to that in a second because I think that's just like such a beautiful concept. But something about this is also reminding me of a part in Inventing the Renaissance where Ada is talking about going to like a historical conference with a bunch of other historians that are very interested in the Renaissance. And there's obviously like different convention rooms with different topics going on at all times. And in the rooms that she was in, she was surrounded by a bunch of men and she was kind of thinking to herself, like, where are the women? I know I'm not the only woman here. I've seen them in the hallway. Where are they? And she goes exploring and she finds them in a room where they're talking about hats. Like the hats that were worn at the time would tell you a lot about the person, the status, what they were doing day to day, all of these things. And she said that, I think she referred to it as like a residue of genderedness, of like who felt welcome where. And she says women asked about places, people, life, the story part of history, while histories of politics, ideas, and X factors draw more men. And I just thought that was fascinating. She also said that a lot of the biographies are written by women. And Ada put forward some theories about why that might be. You know, women still not fully receiving as many opportunities in this realm as men, that kind of thing. But I also think there's something about like the story of history that you actually see yourself in, or stories in general that you actually see yourself in. Finding those pieces, those details that you can gather and put in your own carrier bag is like incredibly liberating. But I want to call us back to the very beginning of this episode now, the Tumblr post that I read. It says, I think the purest form of love is just wanting someone to notice life with you. Taste this, look at that, hear this song again and again until you can't imagine noticing life without them. You're probably like, girl, what does that have to do with the carrier bag theory of fiction? But I want to call us back to an episode that I put out like, I don't know, a little less than a year ago at this point about the language that we use around love. So much of the languaging is like, love is a battlefield. You have to win the other person over. You're being hit on, you're gonna shoot your shot. And all of this language is still centering domination. And I've talked about that before, but I think the carrier bag theory of fiction adds a new layer to it where it's like, oh, this language is kind of the byproduct of that expectation that every great story has conflict at the center of it. Obviously, all relationships will navigate conflict, but we can start to see how domination and conflict actually stays at the center of even stories that are supposed to be about love. But to repeat what Ursula just said about home being a kind of carrier bag, she says home being another larger kind of pouch or bag, a container for people. This just makes me think if Ursula is putting forward like the function of the novel is to carry all that is sacred, I think she's also saying that relationships do the same thing. It kind of reminds me of this theory of the universe that I have that is totally not based on science and is probably completely inaccurate, but it's like a lovely, beautiful image in my head that I've carried with me for a very long time, which is that the universe is a nesting doll situation. And basically, like the cells in my body are little living beings that are experiencing my body as a sort of universe. And then I'm here in another body, and the universe that I am perceiving is actually just another being that I'm in. I am not high, I promise. But there's just something about that image that makes me feel so held, like I'm like in a little womb, and it's probably complete bullshit, but whatever. If they can tell bullshit stories about war, I can tell bullshit stories about being cradled in the womb of the universe. Anyways, there's another Tumblr post that I also think is really beautiful about love, and it's by Inkskinned. Shout out if you were a Tumblr poetry girly in the 2010s. You probably know who Inkskinned is. But they say, something about love makes you look at things differently. The really important part of this is that any love will work. If you love blue, you will see it everywhere. If you love soft things, you will note the cat and the thread count and the moss. You will find your best friend in ugly greeting cards and haunted dolls and terrible fanfics, and since they remind you of her, they will be beautiful. So you will love the world differently for having loved someone else. You will love a certain cereal or Pokemon because of your brother. You will hear your favorite band song playing in a random store, and the love of it will make the whole world a little more golden. You will read a poem so many times, the words become their own creatures. You will find you cannot listen to certain music without thinking of your favorite show. This Velveteen Rabbit transformation occurs. The love does not stop. It echoes. It echoes throughout the little nesting doll of the universe. I feel like I'm maybe getting a little bit too meta with that metaphor there, but whatever, we're rolling with it. But this post reminded me of a listener question that I had seen a few days before, and it says this: I believe that joy can reach its summit when shared, but I have experienced many cases when I shared something that literally changed my life in the way I perceive the world around me and inside of me, and the other person I trusted expressed criticism almost instantly, or was indifferent, and it hurt so much that I had to bite my lips and wait until I was alone to cry. Examples: I'm watching one of my favorite anime, Violet Evergarden, with friends, and during episode 1 they start to criticize its main ideas. I'm watching Dune with my family, and in the best moments they make contemptuous jokes. I'm listening to the newest Harry Styles album for the first time, and my acquaintance tells me that it's Lent and I shouldn't dance. I'm sharing the book that I've read recently, and the person says nothing or is hardly even listening. I know everyone has their own taste. It's not the case that I want everyone to like what I like. I just want to share my happiness with people around me, and now I feel as if I'm in danger of losing the ability to spontaneously express myself. And wow, reading this really threw me back to a younger version of myself, where I feel like I've definitely had moments in my life where I would share something that I love with someone else, and if they weren't as into it as I was, it would feel like a complete rejection. I also want to say I was having a conversation with a friend a few nights ago, and we were talking about how when we were younger, like when we were in school, it was such a big deal to like the same things as our friends. Like, he was talking about him and his friend group all having one comedian that they really loved, and like that became a bonding thing together. And I think when your like main community is from such a small pool of people, like when you're in school, you've maybe got like 25 people that you're really like floating around with, and it is so important to find common ground with one another that like if someone doesn't like the same shows as you, it feels make or break in a way. And even like you could kind of tell sometimes when a friendship was petering out because y'all stopped caring about the same things, and it just felt like such a big deal. But I think that as you get older and your pool of people gets larger, which I guess doesn't always happen, but you know, if you are living in a city, I saw Eliza Day say something about how if you move to LA and you're very authentic and your authenticity turns off 99% of people, you've still got 100,000 people in LA that really fuck with you. But if you've got a pool of 100 people and you turn off 99% of them, that leaves you with one ally. And I think I say all that because where I'm at right now in my life, liking the same TV shows and books and pop stars as my friends is not all that important to me. But I know that at one point in my life, that really would have been an indicator of like, okay, who's on the outs, you know? So I wanted to just say that before I got into everything else, because I do think that sometimes these feelings are very specific to where you're at in life, and you won't always feel this way. But your last sentence, I feel as if I'm in danger of losing the ability to spontaneously express myself. I believe that the only way to preserve your ability to spontaneously express yourself is to give yourself a container, a carrier bag, one might say, that's not spontaneous. Like something that requires you to intentionally engage with these things that you love, these things that you're gathering and hoping to share, something that can hold these sparks of interest without requiring the people around you to engage at the level that you are, or to agree completely with your feelings about it. Because that's not in your control. What is in your control is how you're using the tool of the carrier bag, like how you're gathering all of this stuff and engaging with it and keeping that spark alive. That's your responsibility. Because sometimes we love the people around us to the best of our ability, and we still don't understand why they love what they love. It reminds me of this quote by Simone Weil from Gravity and Grace that says, "The beautiful is that which we cannot wish to change. To assume power over is to soil. To possess is to soil. To love purely is to consent to distance. It is to adore the distance between ourselves and that which we love." To be more specific and show you what I mean, there is an essay by Henrik Carlson called "Love is About Being Invested in Someone's Continual Expansion." And he's talking about his relationship to his wife, Joanna, and talking about how before they had kids, their interests aligned completely. Like they would just be talking all day long about the things that they both loved. And it was like not hard to find the overlap in their interests. You know, connection was effortless. And then after kids, they had a lot less time together, and Joanna started to get into gardening. And Henrik just could not bring himself to care about it. He's like, I was being supportive, I was going out and helping in the garden, but I was definitely going through the motions. Like I didn't actually care about it, and I couldn't really understand why she cared about it. He also had his own separate passion project at the time, which was writing these essays. But the fact that they both had these containers where they were expressing their curiosities and interests within was actually what allowed them to bridge the gap between them. He says, "I was confused as to why she was so interested in the shades of yellow. I mean, I got that it was because she wanted to make the colors right in her composition. But why did she care about getting the colors right? Why was that more important to her than all the things she used to care about and had set aside to understand this? She's a very smart person. I admire her intellect. There has to be a good reason why she found thinking about yellow so meaningful. What could that possibly be?" She answered by explaining some ideas from Goethe's books on color theory and how she was curious to see if she could use that to create a certain atmosphere below the terrace. As she began answering my questions, I noticed myself getting a little excited. I always get excited when I tap into my curiosity and explore something. I had more questions. The deeper we got into it, the more I noticed that a lot of what she was thinking about was actually really interesting. She had, for instance, had several insights about the design process, which I realized could help me in my work writing essays. This was a bit of a narcissistic way of getting curious about her, but you have to start somewhere. We were finding these central bridges that connected what we valued. On these, we could start to smuggle insights between the domains, which led to insight after insight. My experiences writing illuminating her problems, her project illuminating mine. Now we were really getting excited. So the fact that they both had a project, a carrier bag, something to contain all of the things that were sacred to them, that was the thing that allowed them to connect to each other again. You can't expect the whole world to share interest in what you've gathered. You have to honor the distance between you, which means creating a carrier bag for yourself so that you can keep those things that you really love sacred to you, even if other people are shitting on them. It's like, all right, well, they're like safe in my bag now. And a carrier bag is not just a dumping ground. It's not just like a destination for you to hoard all of the things that you're liking at any given moment. It's not a Pinterest board. The idea is that we're taking it somewhere. Ursula talks about the novel as the carrier bag for her, science fiction to be specific. It's this thing she can create that has room for all that's sacred for her, but I actually don't think that the novel is the only kind of carrier bag. For Joanna, it was gardening. For Henrik, it's his essays. For me, it's this podcast. I can hold more because I have a container where I'm able to express more. Henrik says this is one of the joys and challenges of love. The more skillfully you love someone, the more held, encouraged, and accepted they feel, the more they change. If you love someone well, you have to run to keep up, growing your heart to hold what they're growing into. The longer I looked at the world as seen by Joanna, the more I seeped into my eyes. The more I nurtured her to go out and explore things I wouldn't care to explore, the wider my experience of reality became. This, to me, is one of the most profound rewards of love, that it can expand you so that more of the world becomes real to you. You can provide others with the love and care they need to transform and discover new aspects of themselves and of reality, and then, by meeting them where they are now, you can learn to see what they do, and so see further. A few mornings ago, I woke up to my boyfriend talking about the history of math. Like he had fallen down a YouTube rabbit hole about the history of math. And he starts talking about calculus and like trying to explain calculus to me. I have never taken a calculus class before. And I was not immediately interested in this topic because my lived experience has not pointed in the direction of being interested in that topic. Like maybe if I had taken a calculus class. But there was a part of me that was still kind of lit up by that conversation because it seemed to be sort of in conversation with my thoughts on this episode. I just think that we love each other a little bit better when we have ways to hold each other. And I think maybe the people in your life don't have a way to hold you. And that's a skill. Like Henrik was saying, I like the way that he worded it, of like the more skillfully you love someone, they change. It is a skill. And it is unfortunate when the people in your life don't have it, but you also have to ask yourself if you have it. I think a lot of people right now are having a very hard time tapping into true curiosity or memory when it comes to the interests of their loved ones. Because they're so inundated with content and information and stories of big heroes and all of this stuff, and they have nowhere to put it. At least they think so. But we all have the ability, I think, to create a carrier bag for ourselves and make more and more room in there to fit the little things that our loved ones give us. You can tell stories in whatever container you want, whether it's a novel or an essay or a film or a painting or a garden, whatever. And they can be about love. They don't have to be about domination. We don't know what the impact of a story that we read is going to be until years later sometimes. And I think that the same goes for our friends and our family members and our lovers, expanding our world in ways that we can't always see or acknowledge in the moment. So yeah, I don't know, create your little carrier bag, the longest standing tool of human civilization, so that you can express yourself within it. I think that's all I have for you today. I know today was a lot of me just reading and being all over the place. I hope that I made the connections that I was trying to make. If it was confusing, sorry. Okay, I'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Bye.